You think you know the gunfight at the OK Corral. You've seen the movies. Kurt Russell twirling a 12-inch Buntline Special. 6 men facing off in a dusty street. Good guys versus bad guys. The most famous 30 seconds in the American West. But here's what Hollywood never told you. The fight didn't happen at the OK Corral. It happened in a narrow vacant lot on Fremont Street, 6 doors away. The legendary Buntline Special never existed. It was invented by a biographer 50 years after Wyatt Earp died. And here's the part that changes everything. When historians count the guns at the OK Corral, they usually stop at 6 or 7, the revolvers that were fired, maybe Doc Holliday's shotgun. But that's not the complete arsenal. When you account for every weapon that shaped that 30-second gunfight, when you include the rifles trapped in scabbards, the confiscated guns that started the whole confrontation, the weapons carried by the sheriff who failed to stop it, you get a very different number. 15 firearms, not all of them fired, not all of them even drawn, but every single one of them part of the story. Some were documented with serial numbers recorded in court testimony. Others were seen by witnesses but never recovered. A few remain the center of historical controversy to this day. This is the real arsenal of the OK Corral. Let's start with what we know for certain. On October 26, 1881, the coroner of Tombstone, Dr. Henry Martin Matthews, did something that most frontier coroners never bothered with. He recorded serial numbers, 2 revolvers, 2 Colt Frontier 6-shooters, both chambered in .44-40 Winchester center fire, gun number 1, serial number 52196. This was Billy Clanton's revolver. Billy was 19 years old. He'd been shot in the right wrist early in the fight, shattering the joint. Witnesses described him transferring the gun to his left hand, resting it against his knee to cock it, firing until every chamber clicked empty. Photographer C.S. Fly took this gun from Billy's hand as he lay dying. All 6 chambers had been fired. Gun number 2, serial number 46338, Frank McLaury's revolver. This weapon was recovered by a laundryman named Peter Fallahy, lying approximately 5 feet from Frank's body. It had 2 rounds remaining. Assuming the standard safety practice of carrying the hammer on an empty chamber, Frank fired 3 shots. These are the only 2 firearms from the gunfight at the OK Corral with documented serial numbers recorded in 1881. Everything else, including every weapon carried by the Earps, is reconstruction based on testimony, circumstantial evidence, and scholarly analysis. Both Billy and Frank also had Winchester Model 1873 rifles, same caliber as their revolvers, .44-40, a brilliant piece of frontier logistics, one type of ammunition for both your handgun and your rifle. Each Winchester held 15 rounds in a tubular magazine, 30 rounds of rapid-fire capability between the 2 rifles. They never fired a single shot. The rifles stayed in scabbards on their horses while Billy and Frank died with 6 shooters in their hands. This tactical failure, this inability to deploy their superior firepower, tells you everything about how the fight actually unfolded. So that's 4 guns we can document with confidence. Billy's revolver, Frank's revolver, 2 Winchesters on horses. Now it gets complicated. Tom McLaury's weapon status is the pivot point upon which the entire legal justification of the gunfight rests. Was he armed, or was he murdered in cold blood? The evidence for Tom being unarmed is compelling. His brother Ike Clanton testified that Tom opened his coat to show he had no gun. Saloon keeper Andrew Meehan testified Tom deposited his revolver at the Capitol Saloon between 1 and 2 p.m. before the fight. Sheriff Johnny Behan saw Tom open his coat to display he was unarmed. The evidence he was armed is equally compelling. Virgil Earp testified Tom reached for a Winchester on a horse, then fired once, if not twice, over the horse's back. Witness R.F. Coleman initially told the Tombstone Epitaph that Tom raised and fired again before he died. Though he later testified, his mind was a little confused. Here's what we know with medical certainty. Tom McLaury was killed by a single shotgun blast, 12 buckshot wounds in a 4-inch circle on his right side. No revolver was recovered near his body. But here's where it gets interesting. Multiple witnesses saw a man named Wes Fuller run to Tom's fallen body immediately after the shooting. It is widely theorized that Fuller removed a revolver to manufacture the unarmed victim narrative that would lead to murder charges against the Earps. For the purpose of counting the real arsenal, we're including Tom's disputed revolver as gun number 5, the ghost gun, high probability presence, that was removed from the crime scene. Tom also attempted to pull a Winchester from a scabbard on a horse. Gun number 6. Witnesses described him frantically trying to free the rifle as the horse bucked and turned. He was unable to draw it before Doc Holliday leveled the shotgun and fired. So we're up to 6 guns now. 2 documented cowboy revolvers, 2 documented Winchester rifles, 1 ghost revolver, 1 Winchester that Tom tried and failed to access. Now we turn to the Earp faction, 4 men, Deputy U.S. Marshal Virgil Earp, his brothers Wyatt and Morgan, and the deputized dentist John Henry Doc Holliday. Gun number 7, the Wells Fargo coach gun. This is perhaps the most famous single weapon of the engagement. A double-barreled shotgun, likely 10-gauge or 12-gauge, with barrels cut down to between 18 and 22 inches. Virgil retrieved this weapon from the Wells Fargo office shortly before the confrontation. But here's the tactical genius. He didn't carry it himself. He traded it to Doc Holliday in exchange for Doc's walking cane. This swap accomplished 2 things. It disarmed Doc of his cane, which he might use primarily as a club, and more importantly, it allowed the shotgun to be concealed under Doc's long gray overcoat. To the Cowboys, Holliday appeared to be an invalid leaning on a cane. In reality, he was concealing the most devastating weapon on the field. When the fight commenced, Doc pulled the shotgun and killed Tom McClory with a single blast. At close range, under 20 feet, the shotgun was the superior weapon of the era. After firing, Doc discarded the shotgun and drew his revolver. Gun number 8, Doc Holliday's nickel-plated revolver. Witnesses, including Sheriff Bean, specifically recalled a nickel-plated pistol in the hands of the Earp party. The most persistent theory identifies this as a Colt Model 1877 Lightning. The Lightning was a double-action revolver chambered in .38 long Colt. Double action meant Doc could fire simply by pulling the trigger without manually cocking the hammer, a significant advantage for a man whose tuberculosis often left him frail. Nickel plating was practical. It resisted corrosion from sweat better than standard bluing, perfect for a gun carried close to the body. Doc used this weapon to shoot Frank McClory and possibly finish Billy Clanton. Gun number 9, Virgil Earp's revolver. Contrary to the ubiquity of the Colt Peacemaker in Western lore, forensic evidence strongly suggests Virgil favored a Smith & Wesson new model No. 3 revolver in .44 Russian caliber. This weapon represented the pinnacle of 1880s revolver technology. It was a top-break design. Unlike the Colt, which required ejecting spent casings individually through a loading gate, the Smith & Wesson allowed you to break the barrel assembly downward. This action automatically ejected all 6 spent cartridges simultaneously. For a lawman who might face multiple opponents, the theoretical ability to reload rapidly was significant tactical comfort. The .44 Russian cartridge was renowned for accuracy. It fired a heavy 246-grain bullet at approximately 750 feet per second. Manageable recoil, exceptional precision. Virgil carried this weapon in his waistband that day. Mexican carry, common for town marshals who needed to conceal their weapons or access them without the encumbrance of a low-hanging gun belt. Gun number 10, Wyatt Earp's revolver. This is where we must dismantle the most persistent myth in Western firearms history, the Buntline Special. The legend says dime novelist Ned Buntline gave Wyatt a Colt with a 12-inch barrel. This story is a complete fabrication invented by biographer Stuart Lake in 1931. Lake later admitted he invented Wyatt's quotes and that the book was largely fiction. No Colt factory records document an order from Ned Buntline. Ned Buntline never visited Dodge City in 1876. Wyatt Earp never mentioned such a gun to anyone. At the 1896 Sharkey Fitzsimmons fight, Earp's confiscated weapon was described as a .45 caliber, single action with an 8-inch barrel. Standard length. So what did Wyatt actually carry? The most probable answer is a Smith & Wesson Model 3 American in .44 caliber. Mayor John Clum reportedly gifted Wyatt an engraved Smith & Wesson American shortly before the gunfight. Court testimony referenced Clum's gift. Years later in Alaska, authorities confiscated a Smith & Wesson from Wyatt. It's now at the Red Dog Saloon in Juneau. Wyatt carried this revolver in his overcoat pocket that day. Pocket carry allowed him to have his hand on the grip unobserved before the first shot was fired. Wyatt was the only combatant to remain stationary and unharmed during the fight, firing with deliberate precision. Gun number 11, Morgan Earp's revolver. Morgan is widely attributed to carrying a Colt single-action Army, likely with a 4.75-inch or 5.5-inch barrel. The civilian configuration. The .45 Colt cartridge was a powerhouse, 255-grain bullet at nearly 900 feet per second, designed to stop a horse or a man with a single center mass hit. Morgan was likely the first to fire, or fired simultaneously with Billy Clanton. He is credited with the shot that struck Billy in the chest, a wound that would ultimately prove fatal. Despite being shot through the shoulders himself, Morgan continued to operate his weapon effectively. So we're at 11 guns now, the active battery. The weapons actually fired during the 30-second engagement, but to understand how the fight happened, we need to count the weapons that started it. Ike Clanton was unarmed during the actual shootout. He fled as the firing began. But his weapons were the reason the fight happened at all. Gun number 12. Ike Clanton's Winchester rifle. Earlier on October 26, Virgil Earp found Ike illegally carrying a Winchester rifle and a revolver in town, violating Tombstone's Ordinance No. 9. Virgil pistol-whipped Ike and confiscated these weapons, depositing them at the Grand Hotel. Gun number 13. Ike Clanton's Colt revolver. The confiscation of these two weapons was a humiliation that Ike could not abide. It was the specific absence of these weapons in Ike's hands and his demand to have them returned that kept the Cowboys lingering in town. This led to the confrontation in the vacant lot. These guns are integral to the 15-gun count because their confiscation was the primary driver of the day's escalation. Without the seizure of guns 12 and 13, there is no gunfight at the OK Corral. Gun number 14. Sheriff Johnny Behan's sidearm. Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Behan was present at the scene, attempting to mediate or interfere, depending on your historical perspective. As a uniformed law enforcement officer on duty in hostile territory, Ben was undoubtedly armed. He likely carried a Colt single-action Army or similar large-frame revolver, typical of a county sheriff. Behan's failure to use his authority, backed by his weapon, to effectively separate the parties or enforce disarmament is a critical failure point. He had the legal authority to draw his weapon and order the Cowboys to disperse. He did not. His holstered weapon represents the impotence of the county political faction against the aggressive federal authority of the Earps. Gun number 15. The disputed slot. The final gun in the count involves a choice between two historically supported possibilities. Candidate 1. Billy Claiborne's revolver. Billy Claiborne was present in the vacant lot with the Cowboys but fled as the shooting started. While he claimed to be unarmed, he was a self-styled gunfighter who would die in a shootout a year later. Given the cowboy culture, it is highly probable he carried a pocket revolver or had one concealed that he fled with. His flight removed this weapon from the active fight, reducing the Cowboys' numbers. Candidate 2. Doc Holliday's Remington Derringer. Providence research confirms Doc owned a Remington over-under Derringer in .41 rimfire, inscribed to Doc from Kate. As a man who expected treachery, Doc likely carried this hideout gun in a vest pocket as a backup to his primary revolver. While not fired, its presence constitutes a valid part of the real arsenal. Either way, we arrive at 15 firearms. Now, here's what makes this arsenal so fascinating. The Cowboys had superior firepower on paper, 4 Winchester rifles in the immediate vicinity, 15 rounds each, 60 rounds of rapid-fire capability. The Earps had revolvers, 6 shots each, maybe 1 reload if they had time. So why did the Cowboys lose? Distance. By closing the gap aggressively, walking directly into the vacant lot until they were within 6 to 10 feet of the Cowboys, Virgil Earp negated the range advantage of the rifles. In close quarters, a rifle becomes a liability. It's slower to bring to bear, easier to wrestle away. The Earps forced a pistol fight in a phone booth. This suggests the Earps' advance was not just a walk of bravado, it was a calculated tactical maneuver to jam the Cowboys' heavy ordnance. The presence of those 4 Winchester rifles, guns 7, 9, 10, and 12, unused in their scabbards, represents the greatest tactical failure in Western gunfight history. Had the engagement occurred at 50 yards, those rifles would likely have decimated the lawmen. At 6 feet, they were just expensive clubs. Beyond the Buntline Special fabrication, films consistently misrepresent the arsenal. The 1957 film depicts all 6 Cowboys heavily armed. Reality: Ike Clanton was confirmed unarmed. Billy Claiborne was unarmed. Tom McClory's status remains disputed. Movies show extended battles lasting 5 to 11 minutes. The 1957 film's Gunfight took 4 days to film and runs 11 minutes on screen. The actual fight lasted approximately 30 seconds with roughly 30 shots fired. Films show the fight at the OK Corral. The actual location was a narrow vacant lot on Fremont Street, approximately 18 feet wide, between C.S. Fly's photography studio and William Harwood's dwelling, 6 doors west of the OK Corral's rear entrance. For 50 years after the event, locals called it the Fight on Fremont Street. The OK Corral name only attached after Lake's 1931 book and the 1957 film. The 1993 film Tombstone perpetuates the Buntline myth. Kurt Russell carries a custom 10-inch barrel replica made specifically for the production. Court testimony actually indicates Wyatt used a Smith & Wesson, not a Colt at all. Of these 15 firearms, 3 decided the outcome. Gun number 7. The Wells Fargo shotgun. Doc Holliday's decision to conceal this weapon under his coat was the tactical masterstroke. The Cowboys expected revolvers. They got 12-gauge buckshot at 15 feet. Tom McClory's death from this single blast fundamentally altered the geometry of the battle. Gun number 9. Virgil Earp's Smith & Wesson. The top-break design meant Virgil could theoretically reload in seconds instead of minutes. This psychological comfort allowed him to engage aggressively, knowing he had a reload option the Cowboys didn't. Gun number 10. Wyatt Earp's revolver. Whether Smith & Wesson or Colt, Wyatt's weapon was fired with precision. He remained stationary. He took aimed shots. He was the only participant to emerge unharmed. His controlled fire likely wounded Frank McClory, preventing Frank from effectively using his superior marksmanship. Meanwhile, the weapons that should have won the fight, guns 7, 9, 10, and 12, the 4 Winchester rifles, sat, silent in their scabbards, unused, unavailable, tactically neutralized by the Earps' aggressive advance. Here's the uncomfortable truth for firearms enthusiasts. No authenticated OK Corral firearms exist in museum collections that meet academic verification standards. The actual revolvers of Billy Clanton, serial number 52196, and Frank McClory, serial number 46338, the only guns with recorded serial numbers, have never been located. The Autry Museum of the American West possesses a Colt single-action army associated with Wyatt Earp, but it was manufactured in 1883, 2 years after the gunfight. They also hold a Smith & Wesson American that might have been Earp's, but they will not confirm authenticity. The 2014 Glenn Boyer estate auction sold alleged Earp weapons. A Colt 45 claimed to be Wyatt's OK Corral gun sold for $225,000. An alleged Doc Holliday shotgun sold for $150,000. However, Boyer's credibility is widely disputed. The Colt serial number was rubbed off. The barrel grip and cylinder had been replaced. True West magazine documented fabricated portions of Boyer's books. So, of the 15 guns at America's most famous gunfight, only 2 were ever properly documented with serial numbers, and neither survives in any known collection. Everything else is educated speculation at best. So let's count them one more time. Active battery, guns fired during the fight, Billy Clanton's revolver, Frank McClory's revolver, the Wells Fargo shotgun, Doc's nickel-plated revolver, Virgil's Smith & Wesson, Wyatt's revolver, Morgan's Colt. 7 guns fired in 30 seconds. Tactical reserve, weapons present but unused. Billy Clanton's Winchester, Frank McClory's Winchester, Tom McClory's Winchester. 3 rifles that could have changed everything. Disputed weapons, Tom McClory's ghost revolver. 1 gun that may determine whether the fight was justified or murder. Catalyst weapons, Ike Clanton's confiscated Winchester, Ike Clanton's confiscated revolver, 2 guns whose seizure started the entire confrontation. Peripheral arms, Sheriff Bayan's sidearm, Billy Claiborne's probable revolver, or Doc's Derringer. 2 guns carried by men who failed to prevent or fled from the violence. 15 firearms total, not all fired, not all drawn, not all even confirmed to exist. But every single one part of the architecture of violence that created the most analyzed 30 seconds in American history. The lesson isn't about who had the most guns or the biggest caliber. The lesson is about tactics, distance, and decision-making. The Cowboys had the firepower to win. They had the high ground of the vacant lot. They had rifles that could tear apart the Earp party from 50 yards, but they never deployed them. The Earps closed the distance, neutralized the superior armament, and forced a close-quarters revolver fight where their discipline and experience won the day. That's the real story of the arsenal at the OK Corral. Not the guns that were fired, but the guns that weren't. Not the legendary Buntline Special that never existed, but the borrowed Wells Fargo shotgun that decided the fight in a single devastating blast. And somewhere, in a trunk or a museum basement or a private collection, serial numbers 52196 and 46338 might still exist. The only 2 guns we can prove with certainty were there. The rest is history and speculation, and the architecture of myth built on 30 seconds of smoke and blood and thunder in a vacant lot on Fremont Street. That's the real arsenal. 15 guns, 30 seconds, 3 deaths, and a legend that refuses to die.